My name is Daniel Harris, and for most of my life, I thought I understood the meaning of family. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. We had our disagreements like everyone else, but I always believed that when it really mattered, we'd be there for each other. That belief carried me through some of the hardest moments of my life. Until the winter of last year. That's when everything I thought I knew came crashing down. It started with a cough. Nothing serious at first. I brushed it off, assuming it was just the cold weather or maybe a stubborn flu. But the cough lingered, then worsened. Before I knew it, I was waking up in the middle of the night gasping for air. One trip to the ER turned into an ambulance ride to a bigger hospital. Pneumonia, they said. Complicated by an underlying condition I hadn't even known I had. Things got serious fast. I was put on oxygen, hooked to 4 drips, and monitored around the clock. Days turned into weeks. I barely remember some of it. The sedatives blurred the edges of my memories. I remember voices, though doctors talking in low tones. The beeping of machines. The way my sister's voice cracked. The first time she called me in the ICU, she told me not to worry, that the family was handling everything back home. I believed her. While I was fighting for every breath, I thought about my little house. I'd bought it 10 years ago. After saving every spare dime from my job as a mechanic. It wasn't big. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. A small 2-bedroom with a porch that caught the morning sun. The kind of place where you could drink coffee outside and listen to the birds before the world got loud. It held my life, my tools. My old guitar, boxes of photographs. My dad's watch. It was more than just a roof and 4 walls. It was the place where I felt safe. The place I thought I'd grow old in. So when my sister said they were handling things, I pictured her watering my plants, maybe bringing in my mail. I didn't know what she really meant. It wasn't until 2 months later, after multiple surgeries and countless nights of wondering if I'd ever breathe without a machine again, that I was finally discharged. I stepped out into the cold February air, my lungs aching but my heart light. I was going home. Or so I thought. The cab driver pulled up to where my house should have been. I saw the porch, saw the same streetlight at the corner. But something was wrong. The curtains were different. There were toys in the yard I didn't recognize. And when I tried my key, it didn't fit. A man I'd never seen before opened the door. He looked at me like I was a stranger on his doorstep, which, apparently, I was. "Can I help you?" he asked. My voice caught in my throat. This is my house," I said. He shook his head. "I bought this place 2 months ago, from the Harris family." My chest tightened, not from illness this time, but from something far worse. I stood there, my breath forming clouds in the winter air, trying to process his words. The Harris family. My family. I stumbled away from the door, my mind spinning. I called my sister. She answered on the second ring, her voice chipper, in a way that made my stomach churn. "Daniel, you're out of the hospital." "That's great," she said. "Where's my house?" I asked. There was a pause, long enough for me to hear the sound of clinking glasses and faint laughter in the background. "Oh," she said finally, her tone shifting. "About that. We had to make some decisions while you were gone. You sold it." My voice broke. She sighed. "We didn't know if you were going to make it, Daniel. The bills were piling up. We thought it was the best thing to do." I could barely hear her over the noise behind her. "Where are you?" I demanded. "At Mom's. We're having a little get-together." A get-together. I didn't know it yet. But that little get-together was a full-blown celebration. They'd sold my house. Well, I was hooked up to machines. Well, I couldn't speak more than a few words without coughing. And now they were drinking and laughing as if nothing had happened. As if I didn't exist. I hung up before she could say another word. The cold felt sharper now. It cut through my coat and into my bones. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a place to go. I only had the clothes on my back and a hospital bag with some papers and medication. I found myself walking. 1 block turned into 2, then 5. By the time I stopped, I was sitting on a bench outside the diner I used to go to every Sunday. The owner, a woman named Carol, spotted me through the window. She came out, her eyes widening. "Daniel, oh my God, you look like you've been through hell." I laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that felt good. "You could say that." She insisted I come inside. The warmth of the diner wrapped around me like a blanket. She brought me coffee, black just the way I liked it, and didn't push for details right away. When I finally told her what had happened, she shook her head in disbelief. "Your own family," she said quietly. I nodded. "I don't even know where to start." She leaned against the counter. "Start with tonight. You're staying in the apartment upstairs. It's not much, but it's warm. For the first time that day, I felt a flicker of relief. But relief didn't erase the anger building inside me, or the questions. Why didn't they call me? Why didn't they wait? Why did they celebrate instead of even pretending to care about what this would do to me? As I lay in that small upstairs apartment later that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized something. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about the house. It was about trust. And mine had been shattered beyond repair. I didn't know it then, but this was only the beginning. The beginning of finding out just how far they'd gone, and how much they'd taken while I was too weak to stop them. The next morning, I woke up to the faint smell of coffee drifting up from the diner below. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then it all came rushing back the house. The stranger at the door, my sister's voice over the phone. I sat up, slowly, my chest aching, and stared at the faded curtains of the small apartment. This wasn't home. It wasn't even close. Carol had left a thermos of coffee and a brown paper bag with a sandwich. By the door, the kindness hit me harder than I expected. It had been a long time since someone had done something for me without expecting anything in return. I ate in silence, my thoughts bouncing between anger and confusion. I couldn't shake the sound of the laughter I'd heard in the background when I called my sister. It wasn't just that they sold my house. It was that they didn't even seem to care what it meant to me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my messages. There were a few from friends who'd heard I was out of the hospital. Nothing from my mother. Nothing from my brother. And aside from that one awkward call, nothing from my sister. It felt like I'd been erased. I decided to walk. The winter air bit at my face, but it was better than sitting in that little apartment with nothing but my thoughts. I'd ended up at the edge of the neighborhood where I grew up. Some of the houses looked the same familiar peeling paint, the same mailboxes I remembered from my childhood. But when I turned the corner toward my mother's house, I froze. There were cars lined up along the street. Music drifted out through the half-open front door. Laughter. Again, I stood there for a minute, watching as people came and went, carrying plates of food, clinking glasses together. I recognized a few of them cousins, old family friends. It looked like some kind of celebration. My stomach turned. Against my better judgment, I walked up the driveway. Nobody noticed me at first. When I stepped inside, the warmth hit me, along with the sound of voices and the smell of roasted meat. My mother was standing near the kitchen, holding a glass of wine, laughing with a man I didn't recognize when she saw me. The smile froze on her face. "Daniel," she said, her voice flat. I looked around. There were streamers hanging in the living room, a table covered in food, people clinking glasses like it was New Year's Eve. "What's going on?" I asked. Nobody answered. My sister appeared from the hallway, holding a plate piled high with food. She gave me a look that was somewhere between surprise and irritation. "You shouldn't just walk in like this," she said. "This is my family's house," I shot back. She glanced at my mother, then back at me. "We're celebrating," she said simply. "Celebrating what?" My voice was shaking now. Her smile was tight, almost forced. "A new chapter. A new chapter. As if my house, my life, my things were just an old story they could close and forget about." I turned to my mother. "You knew about this?" She didn't answer. She just sipped her wine and looked away. Something inside me cracked. I wanted to shout. I wanted to demand an explanation, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I turned and walked out. The cold air outside felt like a slap, but it was better than staying in that room another second. I didn't stop walking until I was back at the diner. Carol was wiping down the counter when I came in. One look at me and she knew something was wrong. "I take it that didn't go well," she said softly. I shook my head. They were celebrating, like I was already gone. She set down the rag and poured me a cup of coffee. "Some people can't handle sickness. They distance themselves so they don't have to face it." "This wasn't just distance," I said quietly. "This was betrayal." I thought about my house, how every corner of it had been a part of my life. My dad teaching me how to fix the old, leaky sink in the kitchen. The porch where I used to sit on summer nights, listening to crickets. Now, all of it was gone, boxed up or thrown away, sold to strangers, and for what? I pulled out my phone and scrolled again. That's when I saw the post. It was from my cousin, dated 2 weeks earlier. A photo of my family, my sister, my mother, my brother standing in front of my house with a big sold sign. The caption read, "New beginnings for the Harris family." Underneath were comments from friends and relatives. "Congrats. Looks amazing. Fresh start." I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. They weren't just hiding it from me. They were proud of it. Carol glanced at the phone when I set it down. "That's cold," she murmured. I nodded. "Colder than this winter." For the rest of the day, I sat at the counter, nursing cups of coffee and trying to make sense of it all. Part of me wanted to cut ties completely, to pretend I didn't have a family anymore. But another part of me needed to understand, needed to know why, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the street. I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this go. If they thought I was too weak to fight back, they were wrong. The next morning, I started making calls. Old friends, neighbors, people who might know something about how the sale happened. One of them, Mr. Carlson, lived across the street from my old house. He was in his 70s, but sharp as ever. "Daniel," he said when he picked up. "I was wondering when you'd call." "You knew?" I asked. He sighed. "Your sister came by with some papers a while back. Said you were moving into assisted living because you couldn't take care of yourself. She had someone with her, a man in a suit. They went door to door, telling neighbors they'd be putting the place on the market." My stomach twisted. She told people I was moving into assisted living. That's what she said. Made it sound like it was all your idea. I thanked him and hung up, my hands shaking. It was one thing to sell my house behind my back. It was another to lie to everyone I knew. I didn't know yet how deep the lies went, but I was going to find out. And when I did, they were going to have to face me. Face the truth they'd buried under their new beginnings. And champagne toasts. I just didn't realize then how much more they'd taken while I was lying in that hospital bed. The days after I learned the full extent of their betrayal blurred together. I spent mornings at the diner, nursing coffee and trying to gather my thoughts. Afternoons were spent making calls and following leads, piecing together how they had managed to sell my house so quietly. Every conversation added another layer to the picture of what had happened behind my back. It wasn't just my sister or mother. Even my older brother had been involved, signing documents and convincing the real estate agent that I had approved the sale. The more I discovered, the heavier the anger grew. But anger wasn't enough. I needed a plan. I needed a way to confront them, to demand answers, to take back some control over a life that had been stolen from me. I also needed to heal. My body was still weak, still recovering from weeks of illness and surgeries. I couldn't let rage push me into a hospital bed again. So, I focused on small steps, walking longer distances each day, eating properly, calling my old friends, gathering allies who knew the truth about my family. It was exhausting, but necessary. One evening, as I left the diner, I ran into my neighbor Lisa. She was in her late 30s, a kind woman who had watched over my yard when I was hospitalized. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Daniel, you're out. How are you feeling?" "Better," I said cautiously. Knowing her loyalty could help me, she invited me for tea at her house, just a block away. We sat in her cozy living room, the warm light spilling over the worn carpet. I told her everything. How my family had sold my house. How they celebrated as if I didn't exist. Her face darkened with anger and disbelief. "I can't believe they did that," she said quietly. "I can," I admitted. "I just can't believe I didn't see it coming." She took my hand gently. "You didn't deserve this, Daniel. Nobody would." Her words felt like a balm, soothing some of the sting. We talked long into the night, planning small ways to reclaim some sense of power. She suggested gathering any documents, emails, anything that could prove I hadn't consented to the sale. Realized then that the first step wasn't confrontation. It was preparation. Evidence would be my armor. The next morning, I returned to my apartment with renewed determination. I sifted through old files, hospital papers, any correspondence I could find. Hours passed, the sun rising high into the sky without me noticing. I found a few crucial documents, mortgage papers, letters, old emails between my family and the real estate agent. Each piece was a nail in the coffin of their narrative that I had willingly given up my home. Days turned into a week. Every morning, I walked to the diner. Every afternoon, I dug through paperwork. It was tedious, exhausting work, but it felt good to do something, to take back some control over my life. Carol, seeing my determination, offered me part-time work at the diner. It wasn't much, but it gave me a purpose beyond revenge. It gave me routine. It reminded me that life could continue, even after betrayal. One night, as I closed up the diner, Lisa stopped by. "I've been thinking," she said, leaning against the counter. "Maybe it's time you confront them, face them with the truth." I hesitated. The thought of seeing my mother, sister, and brother in person made my chest tighten. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw accusations across the room. But another part feared what I might uncover. What if their betrayal went deeper? Then I knew. I'm not ready, I admitted. She nodded. That's okay, you don't have to be. But when you are, don't hold back. They need to understand the damage they caused. I knew she was right. Weeks passed, and the chill of late winter lingered. Each day I grew stronger. Each day I collected more evidence, more witnesses. I realized that my story wasn't just about me anymore. It was about justice, about holding people accountable for their actions. And maybe, in some strange way, it was about reclaiming my family, if they didn't understand what they had done. One afternoon, as I was walking past my old neighborhood, I noticed a moving truck parked outside my former home. Boxes were being carried in by strangers. I felt a pang of loss that I hadn't felt before. It was real now. The home that had been mine, filled with memories and moments, belonged to someone else. And yet, the anger I had felt began to solidify into something else. Determination. I would confront them. I would demand answers. I would make them see that the life they tried to erase was still here, still breathing, still strong. That evening, I met with Lisa at the diner again. I'm going to do it, I said, voice low but steady. When she asked soon, I said, I need to be ready. I need to make sure I have everything lined up. She nodded, understanding that patience was part of the plan. The next few days were a blur of preparation. I printed documents, organized emails, made a list of witnesses who could confirm that I hadn't authorized the sale. Each piece of paper, each recorded conversation, felt like a step back toward my life. Then one morning, I received a call from an old neighbor. Mrs. Jenkins. Daniel, I saw something you might want to know, she said in a hushed voice. I listened intently as she explained that during the week I had been in the hospital. She had overheard a conversation between my sister and a real estate agent. They had been discussing the quickest way to sell my house, speculating on how little I could fight back due to my illness. I felt my stomach turn. This wasn't just a sale, it was calculated, cold, intentional. I hung up and sank into a chair at the diner. My hands shook, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to cry. It wasn't just grief for the house. It was grief for the family. I thought I knew. For the trust that had been shattered. For the life that had been taken from me. While I was helpless, Carol brought me a fresh cup of coffee. Without asking, she didn't need to say anything. Her presence alone was comforting that night. I lay in a small apartment, above the diner. Staring at the ceiling, I thought about the confrontation that was coming. Thought about the questions I needed to ask. I thought about the answers I feared I might hear, and I realized something important. This wasn't just about anger or revenge. It was about reclaiming my life. Piece by piece. About proving that I was more than the sum of their lies. About showing them that no matter what they took, they could never erase me. I didn't know how the confrontation would go. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew one thing. I was ready to face them too. Finally demand the truth. And to find out just how far their betrayal really went. The morning light crept through the small apartment windows, casting soft shadows across the floor. I sat at the tiny kitchen table, coffee in hand, staring at the stack of papers before me. Each document was a piece of the puzzle, record of signatures, emails, and witness statements that would expose the truth. I had spent weeks collecting every scrap of evidence I could find. And now, finally, it felt like the time had come. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to steady my nerves. I had rehearsed the confrontation in my head 1,000 times. Every possible reaction, every possible lie they might throw at me. But nothing could truly prepare me for facing them in person. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The cold winter air hit my face, sharp and biting, but invigorating. I walked down the familiar streets, each step bringing back memories I had almost forgotten. The corner where I had played basketball as a kid. The park where I had my first kiss. The diner where Carol had become my anchor in this storm. When I reached my mother's house, the sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. I took a deep breath and walked up the driveway. The door opened before I could knock. My sister stood there, her eyes wide with shock. Daniel, she began. I didn't give her a chance to finish. We need to talk, I said, my voice firm. She stepped aside, letting me in. The familiar warmth of the house hit me, but it felt wrong. It wasn't my home anymore. I walked into the living room and saw my mother and brother sitting on the couch. They looked at me as if they had just been caught in a lie, which, in a way, they had. Why? I asked, my voice shaking with emotion. My mother's eyes flicked to my sister, then back to me. We thought it was best, she said quietly. Best for who? I demanded. For the family, my sister added. For the family, I repeated, my voice rising. Or for yourselves? My brother shifted uncomfortably. We didn't know if you were going to make it, Daniel, he said. And that gave you the right to take everything from me while I was in the hospital. I shouted. The room fell silent. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. I took a step closer, holding up the stack of papers. I have proof that none of this was necessary, I said. Emails, documents, witness statements. You lied to everyone. You sold my house and celebrated it, as if I didn't exist. My mother's face turned pale. My sister looked away. My brother swallowed hard. Daniel, we didn't mean. My mother began, but I cut her off. You didn't mean? I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. You didn't mean to destroy my life, my memories, my home. You didn't mean to erase me. Tears welled in my eyes. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of the betrayal. Every memory, every moment that had been taken from me, surged through me. Then I calmed myself. I couldn't let anger blind me. I needed clarity. I needed answers. Why? I asked again, softer this time. They looked at each other, hesitant, unsure. Finally, my sister spoke. We were scared, she admitted. We didn't know what would happen if you survived. We thought maybe it would be easier this way. Easier for who? I asked, voice steady but cold. For us, she said, barely above a whisper. I felt a surge of disgust. All those nights in the hospital, fighting for my life, and they were thinking about themselves, and then celebrating it. I opened the folder and laid the papers on the coffee table. Look at this, I said. See how much you manipulated everyone. This wasn't about me being sick. This was about control, about taking what wasn't yours. They looked at the papers, but their expressions were unreadable. It was like they were seeing themselves through my eyes for the first time. I took a deep breath. I need to know everything, I said. Every lie, every deception, every move you made while I was fighting to survive. My mother hesitated, then nodded slowly. We'll tell you, she said. The next hours were filled with confessions. How my sister had called the real estate agent, insisting the sale be fast. How my brother had signed papers and told neighbors I had approved the transaction. How my mother had kept quiet, telling herself it was for the good of the family. Every word cut deeper than I expected. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a revelation of how little they truly understood or respected me. And yet, beneath the anger, a part of me still wanted to understand. To grasp why people you love can hurt you in ways you never imagined. By evening, the room was heavy with silence. I had listened to their confessions. I had seen the guilt and shame etched on their faces. But seeing it didn't make the pain go away. I stood up, feeling the tension in my shoulders. I need time, I said. I need to process this. They nodded, understanding. I left the house and walked the streets alone. The cold night air was crisp, clearing my head. I thought about my next steps. I had evidence. I had witnesses. I had a chance to reclaim what was rightfully mine. But I also knew this wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about my life, my dignity, my sense of self. And it was about seeing my family for what they truly were. The moon hung low in the sky, casting pale light across the empty streets. I felt a mix of grief, anger, and determination. This was far from over. Whatever came next, I knew I wouldn't be passive. I wouldn't let them define me. I wouldn't let them win. I had survived the hospital. I had survived their betrayal. And now, I was ready to survive the reckoning. The days that followed were quiet, almost painfully so. I spent my mornings walking the streets I used to know so well, retracing the steps of memories that had once been mine. Each familiar corner, each cracked sidewalk, reminded me of what had been lost and of the resilience I had discovered within myself. Evenings were still spent at the diner, sipping coffee and talking with Carol and Lisa. They became my anchor, reminding me that even when family falters, there are people who stand by you. Slowly, I began to reach out to old friends, neighbors, and colleagues. I shared my story, piece by piece, finding both support and validation in the people who had known me for years. I realized that while my house had been taken, the essence of home was something I carried within me. It wasn't a place. It was memories, relationships, and the strength to rebuild. One afternoon, I returned to the neighborhood where my house had once stood. The new owners were outside, carrying boxes into the home. I stopped at the edge of the yard, observing quietly. There was no anger this time, just a gentle sadness, mingled with acceptance. I whispered a goodbye to the house I had loved, knowing that the chapters of my past had closed, but that new ones awaited. I began to focus on rebuilding my life. I found a small apartment, cozy enough to feel like a fresh start. I filled it with the few belongings I had recovered and the mementos I had kept in storage. I started working again at the diner, earning my own money, reclaiming a sense of independence. The routine gave me structure, and with it, a new confidence. I also started documenting my experiences. Writing became a way to process emotions, to untangle the complex web of betrayal, love, and disappointment that had shaped my recent months. And through writing, I discovered clarity. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about absolving them of guilt. It was about freeing myself from the anger and grief that threatened to define me. When I finally spoke with my family again, it was different. We met at a small cafe, neutral ground. They came, hesitant and unsure. I listened as they spoke, acknowledging their actions and the pain they had caused. It was not easy, it was not perfect, but for the first time, there was honesty. No celebrations, no lies, just a raw confrontation with the past. I told them how their actions had affected me, how it had felt to be erased while fighting for my life. They listened, genuinely, some tears falling, faces pale with remorse. And though I could not undo what had happened, I could choose how to move forward. We didn't hug, we didn't declare everything fixed, but we sat there, sharing a quiet understanding that the future could be different. I realized then that family is messy, flawed, human. And sometimes the bonds that hurt the most are also the ones worth repairing, even if cautiously. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild connections. I reached out to my brother more often, setting boundaries, but also allowing room for understanding. I talked with my sister, finding moments of laughter among the lingering tension. With my mother, we shared quiet mornings, sipping tea, and reflecting on memories that weren't tainted by betrayal. Life didn't suddenly feel perfect. There were still pangs of grief, moments when the weight of the past pressed heavily, but there were also moments of triumph. The first time I cooked a meal in my new apartment, I felt a sense of accomplishment. The first time I hosted a small gathering for friends, I realized that home isn't just a place, it's the people who care, the connections that endure. I also learned to trust again, slowly. To accept that some people, even family, might falter, but that doesn't define the entirety of human relationships. There was healing in that understanding, and there was hope. One evening, sitting on my small balcony, a warm cup of coffee in hand, I reflected on the journey I had been through, from the hospital bed to the loss of my home, from the betrayal of those I loved to the quiet rebuilding of my life. I realized I had discovered something profound. Strength doesn't always come from triumphing over others. Sometimes it comes from surviving the betrayal of those closest to you, and choosing to rise anyway. And as I watched the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a deep sense of peace. The past would always be a part of me. The scars would remain, but they no longer defined me. I had reclaimed my life, my sense of self, and even a cautious trust in the possibility of family. The road ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities alike. But I was ready. I had survived the unimaginable. I had faced betrayal, pain, and loss. And now, I was stepping into a new chapter, armed with the lessons of the past and the quiet strength that comes from enduring and moving forward. I smiled, knowing that while life would never be perfect, it could still be meaningful. And for the first time in months, I felt like I truly belonged in my own life, in my own story. And in the world that had felt so harsh just weeks ago, I had lost much, but I had gained something greater: resilience, clarity, and the understanding that while people can hurt, life continues, and sometimes it offers second chances, even when they come quietly, unexpectedly, and gradually. I sipped my coffee, feeling the warmth seep into me, and I knew, deep down, that this was not the end. It was a beginning defined not by betrayal, but by the strength to rise, rebuild, and embrace the possibility of life beyond the pain.